Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. In this week's episode, we're talking about the Art of Manliness, a website and podcast that's built up an intensely loyal audience and is monetizing it in interesting ways. Most major media companies are focused on scale. They want to reach ever larger audiences and then leverage that reach to drive more revenue. To accomplish this, they invest time and resources to create content across all major social platforms, from YouTube to TikTok to Snapchat. The Art of Manliness isn't that kind of media company. Let me give you an example of what I mean. It managed to build its YouTube channel to 1.2 million subscribers, an impressive feat, only to mostly abandon the channel several years ago. In a 2017 video, founder Brett McKay explained that there were other projects he'd rather devote his time to, projects like writing a book, lifting weights, and producing his podcast. According to Jeremy Anderberg, the Art of Manliness' managing editor and one of only 3 full-time employees, this kind of narrow focus is part of the company's ethos. It purposefully didn't try to scale like the BuzzFeeds and Vox Medias of the world. Instead, its team devotes nearly all its energy into writing articles and producing a podcast, the latter of which has an incredibly loyal audience. That audience is so loyal that thousands have signed up for a 12-week bootcamp the company runs for, quote, those who wish to revolt against our age of ease, comfort, and existential weightlessness. Anderberg spoke to me about how the Art of Manliness built its audience, why it launched its bootcamp, and what it's like to work for a media company that purposefully stays small. Before we jump into the interview, I want to talk about my Substack newsletter. There's a reason why executives from nearly every major media company have signed up for it. The insights I deliver are indispensable for those who work in the digital content industry. This week I published a 2,000-word feature article about a Canadian media startup that scaled its business model to 34 separate local news sites. By signing up, you'll get case studies like that delivered to your inbox every week. To sign up, go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Or just Google the words Simon Owens and newsletter. Okay, on to my interview with Jeremy. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks, Simon.
So you're kind of a jack of all trades at the Art of Manliness. How was that company founded?
So the origin story starts way back in 2008, which seems like sort of ancient times in the internet world, right? But my founder and editor-in-chief was at a bookstore, I believe it was at Borders, and browsing the men's magazines section and was kind of disappointed with the content he was seeing. So, it was stuff about the latest 6-figure car, how to get 6-pack abs and, look better in bed on the weekend, that kind of thing. And he was like, I really want something different out of, men's lifestyle content, basically. And so he started up the Art of Manliness. The very first article was how to shave like your grandpa, which was about straight razor shaving, and it's still a popular article. So that's kind of the gist of it, and I've been going strong ever since. So 13 years later, still going strong with text and podcasts, and I joined the team full-time, a little over 8 years ago.
And it's mostly like, at least on the website version, it's like essays. It's not like doing like original reporting or anything like that. What's the kind of approach to the content creation on the website?
Sure. Yeah. It's a lot of how-tos. So across, categories, right? So there's stuff about style. There's, like home maintenance how-tos. There's stuff about books and hobbies, stuff to do in your free time. And then we do a little bit of like philosophy. It's kind of what we call our A Man's Life section, which is kind of the headier, more original stuff. But you're right in that it's not like reporting. We're always sort of aggregating information from books and other, expert interviews and articles, things like that.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you mentioned the founder's name.
Oh, sure. So that's Brett McKay and his wife, Kate, and the 3 of us are the full-time employees for Art of Manliness.
Uh-huh. And then like for the actual articles, like what goes into researching those?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so we mostly do long form, which I know is different, from a lot of other like lifestyle sites. So we like minimum is like 1,000 words, which is on the shorter end, but then we do get into 2,000, 3,000. I've done a 10,000 word article in the last year. And so there's a ton of research that goes into it. So a lot of times it's, we'll scan a number of books. We'll talk to experts in the field. We will also do just a Google search and see what, the first page of Google has to offer on the topic, and see how we can differentiate ourselves within that subject matter. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of times, an article is in the making for a number of weeks, even months before we're hitting publish.
And you're definitely not like a page view factory in the sense you're not churning out content. Like your goal is to have something so deep and in depth that it's going to rank really well on Google, right?
Absolutely correct. Yeah. So we do roughly 3 to 4 content pieces a week, in addition to 2 podcasts a week.
And you came in 2012. What was kind of what was that like? Were you recruited, and what was kind of explained as the value proposition of you working for the company?
Sure. It's kind of a fun story. So I was a reader of Art of Manliness in college. The website had gone viral, on Dig, stumble upon some of those early viral aggregator sites, So I'd been a reader pretty regularly, and I graduated college and was in my first job with a social media agency that then ultimately floundered. And so I was looking for work and started up a side hustle, and I was doing editing and proofreading other people's blog posts, resumes, papers. I was a journalism student in college, and that's what my degree is in. So writing and editing has kind of always been a strength of mine. So I had that side hustle business doing pretty well, and then Brett and Kate published a piece on how to start a side hustle and ideas for doing so. And I'm pretty sure this was the first internet comment I ever left. And I commented on that piece, and I said, hey, here's my website, here's what I'm doing, and here's what's working for me with my freelance editing. I saw it just as kind of a marketing thing, right? Maybe other people would see it and email me. And so the next morning, I opened my inbox, and Brett and Kate had actually emailed me and said, hey, we've been looking for a new person to just proofread our pieces. Would you be interested? Of course I was. So I did that solely on a freelance basis for about 6 months. And then they brought me on full time right at the beginning of 2012, or maybe 2013. Can't keep track of the years here anymore. But so the idea when I first started was mostly just editing, proofreading, and then sort of executive assistant stuff, right? So answering emails, getting articles loaded and sort of formatted correctly, right? And then actually hitting the publish button. And then over the years, it's evolved. So as a 3-person crew, we do a lot more than we did 10 years ago. So I'm now kind of managing our ad partnerships and our freelance illustrators and writers and vendors, stuff like that. So it's been quite a ride.
And you were the first and only full-time employee, right?
Correct. Yeah. Outside of Brett and Kate themselves. Yep. So we have, a number of freelancers and vendors we work with, but yeah, for the full-time Art of Manliness crew, we are just 3 strong.
Can you talk a little bit about the editorial ethos of the site? Do you find yourself, it's called the Art of Manliness. Obviously the thoughts about masculinity and its role have been shifting in the 21st century. Do you find yourself amongst the staff debating what it means to be a man in the 21st century and how that should be reflected on the website and the podcast?
Yeah, we do. It's a tricky space to be right now. Like you said, it's obviously way different than it was a decade ago. And especially in the men's space on the internet, you're kind of either, you're far left and really into politics and writing about it, or you're far right and really into politics and writing about it. And there's not much of a middle ground. Our hope is to be that middle ground where anything we publish could be read and enjoyed by anybody across the political and even gender spectrum. Probably at least 25% of our readership is women. So we're not 90% men by any means. So we want to appeal to everyone. And so when it comes to masculinity, we used to write about masculinity a little more intentionally. But in the last handful of years, we've sort of moved away from writing specifically about what it means to be a man, and more along the lines of what does it mean for a man in 2020, 2021 to grow up well. So it's, our hope is to reach the well-rounded guy who, could believe in anything really, and still read and enjoy our site. So as long as it kind of fits into that mission of, will this piece sort of help the reader grow up well, right? Whether he's in his 20s or 50s or whatever, if he's learning something new or being inspired or motivated, then we're good with it.
Yeah, I had the editor in chief of Mel Magazine on several months ago, and he was talking about how he was at Playboy and he was doing features on like the best artisanal axes and cigars or sports cars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's like just like a completely? Do you think like most like traditional men's magazines? You think like the Esquires, the Maxims, stuff like that? Like, have they just kind of been rooted in that kind of 1960s ethos of what a male is?
Yeah, a little bit. I think maybe the difference is Esquire particularly is that, if you get their newsletter, they are hugely into politics these days. And a lot of their content, is sort of if you read it a week too late, you're out of it. So they're doing a lot of like current events, pop culture, politics. And so I actually see them as being, they're, technically more quote unquote relevant, but at the same time more irrelevant because they're really pigeonholing their audience, and you can't go, to an article that's a few years old and find it relevant. So that's sort of, at least where they have gone. And then you get to like Men's Health or Ask Men, and they've gotten really commercialized where they feature a ton of lifestyle products, and both of those approaches have sort of turned us off. So we will actually mine some of those like 1960s, like the actual physical magazines for article ideas. And it's stuff that does really well, but we're doing like those little snippets. So like we had this little piece on like, what's that little pocket in jeans for, like that little stupid thumb pocket. Like we did an article explaining that. That was an idea from mid-century that we saw in an old magazine, and it did really well.
What is that pocket?
So it's originally for a pocket watch, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because people used to carry pocket watches. So yeah, but they still, every pants. I don't know if women's pants have them, but guys' pants do at least, and it's still there today, even though nobody uses a pocket watch. So that's like the kind of stuff that we really like doing, where it has an old vibe, but it's not like this like 1950s masculinity, right? So it's definitely a balance that we're trying to strike.
And you're like 100% focused on evergreen content for the most part?
Yes. Yeah. We really want something to be as readable today as 5-10 years from now. Yeah, we very rarely are doing anything that would be current events. Yeah, we did a little bit with the pandemic. It was kind of hard to avoid that, but that was kind of the one deviation from our norm.
You have a YouTube channel with 1.2 million subscribers, and it used to regularly publish actual videos, but now it features podcast episodes that like there's really not any video at all. It's just like a logo and audio. Did you guys make a conscious decision that you no longer wanted to focus on video?
We did. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. We get asked about video all the time. Why did you stop? Why don't you keep doing it? Because it's great for search results, and people search YouTube all the time, right? Obviously. But as a 3-person team, we have to make some hard decisions about what we're going to focus on and put our energy into. And so, among the 3 of us, none of us really like video, or maybe we're showing our millennialism there, but we're just like not into video content really at all personally. And so, we don't like making it. When we did do it, we ran into a lot of problems just with, writing the scripts, getting the voiceover actors, getting the editors to all sort of work cohesively on a time frame that we wanted to work with. And so we know things have changed obviously in the last handful of years, and there's certainly more of those people available. But we feel like we have a really good rhythm as a team, and so we don't want to go back into the huge time suck that is making good, high quality videos. So certainly, we know we're missing out. We're aware of that, but it just does not fit into our strengths, and so we leave it on the table.
When did you wind down your video production?
Oh, that probably would have been probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, when we started ramping up the podcast production. So those things kind of went hand in hand. We started putting more time and resources into the podcast, and the video stuff kind of got left in the dust.
And the podcast is probably your biggest media property now, right? In terms of the most hardcore fan base.
Correct. Yeah. So, there's a lot of people who listen to the podcast that don't even know that we have a website, right? Even though we mention it, there's people that have been listening to the podcast for a handful of years and then write us and say, "Oh, I just discovered you had a website with all this text content." So yeah, we're 700 episodes in. Podcast gets published twice a week, and it hovers in and out of the Apple top 100 shows for the lifestyle category. So yeah, it's a good deal for us.
What's the format of the podcast?
So we are Q&A format pretty strictly. So there's no sound effects, not much audio production, right, outside of interview editing. And we almost entirely speak with nonfiction authors, partially just because when you're talking about a book, it gives you a really good framework for an outline of a conversation. And, you run into authors and guests who know what to talk about readily, right? Which makes a big difference. And so that's what we do. We like to have something practical, or something that a man or a woman could apply to their life right away, and that's kind of how we do it.
And Brett's the host.
Brett is the host. Yep. So he does all the interviews, and then as a team we sort of do all the other stuff. So the research for who to have on, the interview scheduling and sound checking and working with our freelance editors, all that.
And what's kind of the process of vetting guests, preparing for the interviews, stuff like that?
Yeah, so the guest vetting is probably the biggest time chunk for me personally as the producer. So, I get from publishers 5 to 10 books a week in the mail. They're trying to push their new authors to be on the podcast. And so I will read, anything that seems to fit with the brand. I'll read a quarter to a third of those books and try to get a feel for if it'd be good for the show. If the book is good, then I'll further go into listening to interviews this person has done to make sure they're charismatic, they can, hold a conversation, that sort of thing. And most do, but we do run into folks where it seems like, they might just be on because of name recognition, or someone, didn't do their own homework, what have you. And so then, as a team, then we'll sort of all decide who to book when, because we also like to have a big variety in our sort of categories. So we like to hit, fitness, how to, outdoor stuff, history, philosophy. We like to hit all of those in any given month. So that sort of is part of how we're doing our vetting as well, as does this person fit into where the schedule is right now.
And it seems like there's a lot of fluff in the self-help space. That's something that you're kind of, in terms of trying to separate the wheat from the chaff, that you're trying to, suss out whether this person actually has something really original to say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it really it takes a lot for us to book someone in the self-improvement, self-help world. What's interesting though is that those episodes that we do are ultimately the most listened to, but we, personally go through so many of those books, and they all just say the same thing over and over again. So yeah, we're always looking for some sort of differentiator in that particular space. Then we'll even do like they're not framed as debunking episodes, but they function that way. So we've done, does meditation deserve the hype? What social psychology gets wrong? We just had Jesse Singal on the podcast That was a recent one to talk about his book that gets into, why all this pop psychology is flawed and stuff like that. So we like to hit both sides of it too, which is kind of unique.
So it seems like you intentionally kept the company small.
Yeah.
It's just you three. You had 1.2 million, subscribers on YouTube, which some of my listeners are like, oh my gosh, I would double down on video, especially, now that like there are so many monetization options. It seems like there might have been an opportunity to scale there, but you guys were like very intentional about keeping the company small.
Yeah. When you add employees, when you add revenue streams, things inevitably get more complicated. And while that might lead to more money, that's not what it's really all about, right? I mean, the company makes enough to support the three of us. And so is there much point in trying to blow it up even more, right? So, the podcast, we have, over 2 million listens a month, which puts us in the top 1% of podcasts out there pretty easily. So we really, we just enjoy it, right? Might as well do what you like, as long as you're working and as long as you can. And so, yeah, even though certainly we're leaving things on the table, but we all have a balanced lifestyle that we enjoy, and we're doing work that we enjoy. So why not stay lean and agile and not add that inevitable complexity? Because there's even, a lot of media properties either being bought or taking VC money. And then you see, 6 months later, they're laying off a ton of people. This spring has seen a ton of it with BuzzFeed, The Athletic, The Atlantic, right? Well, some of them are adding folks back in. There was sort of this purge in the spring where you see like, okay, we're actually really glad that we have stayed small, that we have not been acquired, that we can kind of do things fully on our own terms. I think there's a ton of value in that often gets missed by entrepreneurs. And we've had podcast guests talk about it. There's a great book called Company of One. I think Paul Jarvis is the author, and that talks about that. Or the 10% entrepreneur, how you can you don't have to be huge to be a successful entrepreneur. So we really, really enjoy where we're at, and plan on staying small for the long haul.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of debate in media circles about how much the internet from an advertising perspective can sustain media businesses, but a lot of times it's focusing on media businesses that are expecting these huge returns, whereas like I feel like on this podcast, on my newsletter, I come across lots of kind of very small, lean operations that are like, yeah, we make a good living through advertising because like we're not trying to have hockey stick growth. So it's kind of like a matter of perspective in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, the whole point of, being an entrepreneur is to kind of live your own lifestyle. And if you're just pouring all of your resources into getting bigger and bigger and bigger, again, the complexity just multiplies, and you're stuck working 70 plus hours a week. And is that really, the lifestyle that you wanted when you got into it? So.
Mm-hmm. What about your own personal ambitions? Like, obviously, Brett is sort of the voice and the face of the company. I know you write a little bit for the website. Like, what's your level of wanting to have your own kind of personal brand versus like wanting to work behind the scenes?
Sure, that's a good question. So it kind of vacillates, honestly. So when I was, a little younger in my 20s, I was like, oh man, it'd be like fun to grow this company huge, and then I could be sort of internet famous, right? And it'd be awesome. But then, I realized as I've gotten older, I have 3 kids, 5 and under. Like I'm pretty happy to just be comfortable in my job and my lifestyle. So that is less appealing from like a personal point of view. But at the same time, I have also started my own personal newsletter that I send a weekly. Well, it kind of, I guess, depends on your subscription level there, but I send a couple emails a week just about books and interviewing authors, because I love to read. It's like my number one hobby is just to read and write about what I'm reading. So that's at readmorebooks.co is my newsletter. And I have a few thousand folks subscribed there, which is helped by, when I write about books on artofmanliness.com, I link to my own newsletter, and it sort of feeds itself. So I would love for that newsletter just to be like a a fun little side hustle, really, that would, maybe allow my wife to not have to work, or would give our family a little more freedom. Um, it's possible that would someday be, big enough to be full time, but I'm not sure it ever will be, and that's okay. So, yeah, I enjoy my lean and flexible lifestyle here for sure.
Okay, let's return to talking about that book newsletter in a few moments. Where do for the Art of Manliness? Art of Manliness. Where do you get most of your traffic from? It's from Google, right?
Yes, it's definitely like organic search is number one. We rank number one for a lot of content. So, like best paper airplanes, how to make your own candles at home, how to wash a baseball cap, a lot of just that random how-to stuff. We're number one, but it fluctuates as the Google algorithms fluctuate, right? So now from Google more and more on that whole sort of above the fold space, you're seeing the like rich results, you're seeing ads, you're seeing those FAQs, excuse me, with the drop down menus. So the actual like click through search results seem to just get less and less every year, which is a bummer. And so, we're trying to figure out how do we get more traffic, from Google, but also elsewhere. So how do we get more direct traffic, which is our number two source? And then social media, again, you're at the whims of the algorithms. And so we've tried to work with Pocket a little bit. They always send a lot of traffic our way when we get featured. So yeah, it's definitely Google, but we hate being at the whims of their robots, but it's kind of the fate of anyone on the internet these days, isn't it?
Yeah, and for social media, you have a large social media following, but you're not really doing much other than just kind of linking to your stuff. Like it's kind of like almost like a RSS feed in some ways.
Correct. Yeah, just because we have experience doing the interactive stuff on social media, and while some of it is fun, we're not sure there's enough return. And you just, man, when you're more interactive, you get into the real just dirt scum of the internet, especially when you're like the bigger you are, it seems like you just attract more crazies. So we've stayed away from the interaction piece. We do a little bit, on Twitter and Instagram here and there, but yeah, it is mostly just basically an RSS feed.
And so you get a lot of your revenue from advertising. What kind of advertising are you running? And like, is it direct sales? Or are you part of larger ad networks?
Sure. So on the website, the banner ads are just run through Google. That's pretty turnkey for us. We'll upload the banners and let it do its thing there, and that's pretty easy. The podcast is certainly the primary revenue stream, and that for the advertising we work with Mineral, which is part of Stitcher. It's all like one big conglomerate that's hard to keep track of. So they do all the ad sales, and what they'll do is they'll sell to one company, right? Like BetterHelp, you're hearing all over the place right now, is like online therapy. So they'll sell BetterHelp, and then BetterHelp will just sort of throw their ads across the entire network, right? So we will record our ads. Brett prefers to do, just for our sake, to read his own ads versus doing like a third party read, just because there's more click through, which is better for us in the long run. So he reads all the ads, and then we upload them, and that's about it. So we don't have to do any of those podcast ad sales, which is great, because when we were doing that, 6 years ago, it takes up a lot of time and energy. So it's nice to be able to offload that.
And it sounds like they're not really selling to like your demographics or anything like that. This is just like BetterHelp, these meal kits, stuff like that. Like that's just more kind of general podcast advertising than them being like, we're finding products that are specific to your audience or anything like that.
It is, yep. And every once in a while there'll be something specific to like men's lifestyle, but definitely not specific to like the Art of Manliness readers. So we'll get like Sax underwear, right, which is a men's underwear brand, and they're obviously just doing men's lifestyle space. Yeah, really, when it comes to like mid-roll, they're really only sort of differentiating between like primarily women shows, primarily men shows. So there's a podcast I was listening to this week that's part of mid-roll, and I got the same BetterHelp ads that we have, the same ZipRecruiter ads that we have, but then we have the Saks underwear ad, they have the Third Love bra ad, and that's like the one difference, right? So yeah, it's kind of funny.
You published a book a few years back that's kind of like, I think you kind of marketed it as like a bathroom reader type of thing. Is that like a consistent seller? It's very evergreen in its subject matter. Is that like something you're constantly selling, or was that just kind of like a little bit of a side project?
Yeah, so the books, so there's a number of books. So three have been published by like traditional publishing houses. So they're in our, I guess, internal communications. They're the green cover, the red cover, the blue cover. So there's one that's like Art of Manliness, sort of like Victorian gentlemanliness skills for the modern man. That was published, I think, 2009. And then another one that was like just sort of old essays on masculinity and self-improvement. That was 2010 or 11 maybe. And then the illustrated Art of Manliness, that's the blue cover. Is that the one that you have in mind?
Yeah, I think like 2017 or so.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the newest one. And that's, we worked with our illustrator, who's been a freelance illustrator with us for a number of years. And with him, we put together just a bunch of illustrated guides that run across the categories. So yeah, it's sort of a gift book. Those three all sell really well. We have a number of original ebooks that also sell okay. But yeah, those sort of three like primary books that were published by traditional publishing houses still sell pretty well, and they end up like in the like gift section of like bookstores and Amazon, right? So they're end up being like fun graduation gifts, holiday gifts, that sort of thing.
You also have a membership program. How is that structured?
Yeah, so that's the Strenuous Life. That's sort of a Boy Scout program for men. So it's an online platform, but you do stuff in real life. You do, these tasks to complete a badge, just like the Boy Scouts do. So you can get a real badge in the mail, which is pretty cool, and display it. So the way that works is it's a one-time payment of $225, and you get lifetime access. We have been told many times that price is too low, and that we should be doing something, a monthly cost that just goes on and on forever. But we have done this very intentionally because one, we are aware of our audience's not frugality, but their money awareness, and we know that when you have a monthly cost, that you'll often just forget about it, even when you're not using it, and sort of be sucked into giving more money than you want, right? And then in terms of the the 225, we know it could be worth a few times that, but again, we also know our audience that we don't want to leave out the folks that you would inevitably leave out when you get into a higher price range. So we send a welcome kit for that includes like a physical handbook with all the badges and a workout outfit, which is pretty fun. And then the entirety of the platform. So all of the badges, we do weekly challenges, we foster in-person meetups with geographic groups. So we have 8,000 or 9,000 folks around the world that are signed up now, and we do enrollments 4 times per year. So it's still going strong, and it's been a really fun program to see. And that's really, in some ways, what we're most proud of, because you see people using the content and then actually doing things in real life, which is what we love to see.
So they pay $225. That gives them a lifetime membership, but it's really they're paying for that 12-week course. They get stuff in the mail. They get a workout clothes. What else do they get in the mail?
Yeah, so that's what they get in the mail. I think just a handbook, maybe like some sort of welcome card from Brett, right? And then the outfit. And then, there's this 12-week challenge with weekly challenges and some other gamification type things to make it fun and exciting. And then, once they
these
complete,
are things that like people are doing at home in their
correct.
own time.
Yes. So for example, there might be take a cold shower every morning for 7 days, talk to 3 strangers this week, sleep outdoors, in a tent or something. So these are, like IRL in real life challenges that are designed to get you doing things in the real world. And then once you complete badges, so we have, an archery badge. If you go to an archery course and complete, this certain set of parameters, and you can buy like a physical Velcro badge for a couple bucks, and we'll send it your way. And we have 50 badges that you can earn. So even beyond that 12 weeks, there's opportunity to keep going. A decent percentage obviously don't keep going. That's just kind of the nature of things. But yeah.
And like, are you sending the courses over email, or is there an online forum that they're all participating in?
Yeah, so the main platform is like a website, sort of a custom built platform that's part of or built by Buddy Boss. I don't know if you're familiar with that company, but their whole business is kind of to like build these custom platforms for communities. So they go to strenuouslife.co, they log in, and there they have access to their classmates. We put everyone in a class, to their geographic groups, to all the badge requirements and content. It's all housed in one spot online. Yeah.
And then sometimes do the members meet up in person?
Yeah, so we like to encourage meetups within geographic groups. So we have Strenuous Saturday, which is the third Saturday of every month. We like to encourage the leaders of every geographic group, sort of assign guides, or what we call them. And they're just volunteers, and they will kind of organize things for their locale. So whether it's a whole state or a city or region, whatever, folks get together and they'll like earn badges together. So they'll go swimming for the Frogman badge. They'll go on a hike for the Outdoorsman badge. They'll do, volunteering for the community service badge. So yeah, it's quite a fun program for sure.
Does your team like ever get out to meet the audience or the members or anything like that? Obviously pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Every once in a while we do. So I know, Brett will be active with the Tulsa group. I'm in Colorado, Denver area. I've done some meetups with our Colorado group, and it's pretty fun. It's part of it. It's hard to want to do too much, just because then your whole life ends up being work, which nobody wants. But yeah, I have certainly met the group, and it's totally normal guys who just want to have some community with other guys and do some activities, and that's about it.
Is the typical customer like someone who listens to the podcast and it's just that brand affinity thing, or do you get complete randos who don't know anything about the art of manliness and they just discovered this course somehow separately?
Sure. So at this point, a few years in, it's a little bit of both. I think actually probably a pretty good mix, because we do a little bit of advertising on other podcasts and on our own podcast, of course. When it first started, the first couple of years were primarily like loyal Art of Manliness readers who loved having the chance to put some of this into action. But yeah, now at this point, I think, word has spread. There's enough sort of presence out there for us that it's a pretty good mix, that you get people who don't know that the Strenuous Life is really just an arm of the Art of Manliness site and podcast.
It seems like the website would be really good for product recommendations, like the best 5 razors, best thing to buy your boyfriend for Christmas. But you guys don't really do much in terms of like affiliate links or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good observation, and something that is definitely intentional on our part. So, we used to do some of that stuff, gift guides for Mother's Day, Father's Day. We did 12 days of Christmas, with a gift guide for the first 12 days of December. We did that for a number of years. But then ultimately, we just got to a point where we were sort of personally sick of all the commercialization of lifestyle content. You go to goop.com, Gwyneth Paltrow's site, and it's just, man, you're like overwhelmed with just stuff to buy, right? Mm-hmm. So that sort of premise just sort of bothered us personally, and since we're a small team, we could just sort of decide like, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. We have one partner, one retail partner, huckberry.com, and they're basically an online kind of men's department store. We partner with them. We do giveaways roughly monthly, and every once in a while like a dedicated article to a product, but it's always something that we genuinely love and enjoy using. We don't definitely don't push any products we don't use ourselves. That endorsement means a lot to our readers, but yeah, generally we don't like to do product placement stuff, for sure.
So you said you launched your own personal project, this book newsletter. So like, what's the approach there?
Yeah, so it started just because I was having coffee with a friend here in Denver, and he said, people would love to hear what you are reading on a weekly basis because I get a ton of books in the mail. I read a lot personally. I read about 100 books a year. I've been doing that forever. It's just kind of part of my lifestyle at this point. And I read widely. And so people would ask me for book recommendations and stuff like that. And so I finally started this newsletter back in 2018, the start of 2018, just 2 months before my daughter was born, who was our second kid, which is not a great idea, just for the sake of consistency. But yeah, I've kept it going as a weekly newsletter. I've not missed any days in the last 3 years, including through the birth of another child. So consistency, man, is my rock. And I write about a couple of books a week, just what I'm reading and enjoying. And it's been a ton of fun. I interview other authors about books that have impacted their lives and what they're reading and enjoying. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's a real passion project.
So it's like book reviews and just like, what's the motivation of someone subscribing to someone who's looking for more book recommendations for their own reading habits?
Yeah, so it's just kind of like general reviews. So, roughly, like, each newsletter is roughly 1,000 words. So it'll be 400 to 500 word reviews of books. And I think the real benefit is I cover a wide variety of genres. So I'll cover nonfiction and novels and old stuff and new stuff. So the benefit, would be when it comes to readers, a big part of the struggle for readers is what to read next, right? Like, there's this overwhelm of books in the world, and there's only more and more books being published. Every year it just explodes. And so to come to my newsletter and see, here's a couple books that I've enjoyed. I'm generally not writing about the books I don't enjoy, so I'll give people ideas for what they should read next. That's kind of a simple premise, but it seems to work really well.
And do you feel like you've built like a real audience around it?
I have, yeah. So, like I said, I have a few thousand folks, I think 3,500 subscribed to the free newsletter, and then that goes out now. I just recently sort of switched the format. So the free newsletter goes out every other Friday. And then I have about 200 paid folks for $5 a month you can pay, and you'll get 2 emails a week from me. So that includes weekly on Friday, just a couple book reviews. And then on Tuesdays, I send sort of a supplementary email that is either some like just article links I really enjoyed or like a book list. So like I did, in Colorado in the summer, I'm thinking about wildfires. So last week I did 4 great books about wildfires. I'll do kind of books around a theme like that. So there's a couple options. But yeah, I hear from people who want personal recommendations, or people who will say, hey, I've in the last year, like, most of my reading has been based on your recommendations, which is super fun to hear. So yeah, I certainly have a pretty surprisingly loyal readership.
Wow. So it's a decent side income now.
It is. Yeah. And again, it certainly helped because, my bosses let me promote it when I do bookish articles on Art of Manliness. I've been on a number of podcasts, in the last few months, just because, I've made a concerted effort to try to get it to be more of a side hustle. So yeah, it's certainly to a point now where it's a not insignificant amount of money coming in every month. Yeah.
Okay, Jeremy. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So they can find a lot of my writing at artofmanliness.com. I'm roughly every 4th article or so is done by me. I do a few a week there, or excuse me, a few a month at artofmanliness.com. And then my newsletter is readmorebooks.co. Like I said, you can subscribe. There's a free version and a paid version. You can reach me on social media at Jeremy Anderberg on Twitter and Instagram.
Okay, well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks again, Simon.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast, so if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.